So, what was it like in school when you first started before the civil rights movement?
What was it like in school?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, when I was in public school when I was young, I lived in a very white community. So my parents were liberal, so we were comfortable with racial relationships, but the community as a whole was not, and it just never came up in school. People, my classmates were never confronted with black people or any ethnic people, and so it was just sort of a non-issue. And that continued through high school, like was in the same time. And then when I went away to college, of course, I went to Northwestern and things were different, but I was all raised the way I was comfortable. So there was no, in my contact, there was no civil rights movement. There was no issue of racial problems because we didn't have any real mix. So it certainly was a different world than after the 60s.
Well, after the civil rights movement, did you like how schools were more diverse?
Yeah, I always appreciated diversity, again, because of my parents. And I think once I became more conscious of the problem, I must admit, as a public school student in Elmhurst, it just was not, I wasn't conscious of the problem. You read about things in the South. This is an interesting incident. I think my first real awareness was during one of our summer breaks in high school. A friend of mine and I decided to go down to New Orleans. We were working in the summer. We had a couple of weeks off. And we took the bus down from Chicago to New Orleans, which was a long trip. But a bus comes down from Chicago down through Illinois, and it crosses into Kentucky, from Cairo, Illinois, into Paducah, Kentucky. And when we arrived at the Paducah, Kentucky bus station, the driver came and rearranged the passengers so that the black people moved to the back where they were supposed to be. And we had a break, and there's white drinking fountains and black. And I think that was my first real awareness that things were different elsewhere. And it obviously was very uncomfortable for me. And it was very good. I think I felt very good about civil rights movement happening and trying to start correcting some of those problems.
So, was your school segregated that you taught? And if so, did schools attended by the opposite race interact with yours? If not, how did the students react?
You're saying where I taught over
Yeah.
at Glassboro? Yes, it certainly was not segregated. We didn't have a high percentage of black students, but I'm not sure I have a percentage. I would say, anyway, 25%. And a few Asians and other minorities, Hispanics. And it was completely comfortable, in my awareness, completely comfortable at school as far as interacting and the kids interacting with each other. Now, I'm sure there are isolated incidents that I just never heard of, but in terms of my general feeling about how students behaved, and obviously faculty behaved, it was a comfortable situation. I do remember Glassboro becoming very active in the civil rights protests. I can remember there were places where they would take down the American flag and stomp on it, that kind of reaction. There were a lot of kids, I think maybe took advantage and made more out of protesting than they really believed. But Glassboro, and then Glassboro State College, Glassboro was, I think, quite active in favoring and promoting the civil rights movement. And I never felt that racial inequality was a factor on our campus.
Were there any books or speeches that changed your opinion about race and segregation?
Well, I don't know that my opinions ever really needed to be changed outside of what I was said before, becoming more aware of the problem. I guess Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is a key time in everybody's background and relationship to the civil rights movement, and realizing the power of a person like that, and I think basically the power of words. Since I was a speech major, and I was always been very interested in the spoken word and the use of language. Just you stood in awe of that speech and other speeches by King and other civil rights leaders that certainly strengthened my feelings about the need for civil rights action and the need for promoting equality that didn't exist everywhere. So I can't say my opinions changed, my awareness probably changed.
So, do you think schools today should be more diverse? For example, Philadelphia public schools?
You mean in the sense of racial mix?
Yeah.
I'm not all that familiar with how it is now, Owen. I certainly believe in racial mix, and it seems certainly with Russell Byers, I guess there were relatively few white students there, but I think racial mixing and equality therein, I think, is very important. And wherever it doesn't exist, I guess there are movements to bus students from neighborhoods to schools that need more balance. I'm not quite aware of all of that, but I think it's important that racial mixing occur, continue, and be improved if there are places in the school system where it's lacking.
And what do you think we can do to make them more diverse?
To make the schools more diverse?
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough one. Certainly, and again, I'm speaking out of basic ignorance of the school system as a whole. I know your guys' schools because we've been very intimately acquainted with them, and it doesn't seem to be a problem there. But staffing, certainly, the equality of staffing is important. Racial equality and mix. Making sure that if problems emerge, they aren't put under the rug. I mean, if there are some kind of racial issues in a school, they've got to be dealt with directly and openly, and with meetings of students and assemblies and whatever is necessary to be sure that things don't smolder and get out of hand. It's hard for me to say any more because I just don't know what's needed and how much of a problem still exists in the Philadelphia schools, but certainly where there are problems, where kids feel cheated because they're in a minority situation, they've got to be dealt with, they've got to be confronted by administrators and not passed by.